part of my instructions. Homework. Hey, come on in, Robert. Thank you. Just getting this set up so that we can have it so the rest of the kids can watch this as well. Okay, all right. Well, I'm done with all of my announcements, so I'll get you guys those readings so that you guys can do that. Don't have to look at it online. And then that will be due tomorrow. Okay, guys? All right. Okay, so we have Robert Lucero here. He's going to speak to us about World War II and Korean War. And we're just kind of lumping it all in one. We just talked about that a lot of time this year with a lot of days. You guys know that. So we're going to kind of lump both of those together. So I already, we haven't learned about the Korean War yet. We're about there. So just so you know that they just haven't learned about it quite yet. I'm going to be talking more about that tomorrow. So they'll learn more about it tomorrow. But whatever you want to say about it, you're welcome to. Okay. And then I'll just leave those parts out tomorrow if you talk about it today. So that's where, but we're already done with our World War II unit. So yeah, go ahead. Time is yours. Do you have, oh, yes, let's do this. Here, we'll bring it over to this one. Shai, do you want to press the button and turn on that screen for me, please? Oh, okay.
Cool.
Right, so let's take a second to come up and then all good. Yes, I do. Here is the clicker. And we're just waiting for it to load up. All right, here we go. All right, okay, make sure you guys are twice.
Which one's the top one, right?
It should be the down to go to the next one.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's not the Veterans Memorial, it's the Veterans Monument.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
not
that's right.
everybody's dead on that, so.
That's true.
Just a side. All right, my name is Robert Lucero. I work up there at the monument as a veterans officer, social officer, I guess. Although I'm not a person that's authorized to do what you call it, claims by veterans. I just advise them until they can get to a regular service officer. But that may change this year. I'm not sure yet. And I was in the military for over 20 years. A lot of places, a lot of countries, participated in wars, and things like that. Got out. Didn't plan on coming back here, but I did. Plan to leave, but I haven't. So there's a lot of stuff to do yet. Okay, so World War II. How much do you know? There's got a paper, and there's just going to be 5 questions about World War II just to see how much you retained. Very basic questions. All right, first one. You can read it out. I'll just give you a few seconds to write the answer. Circle the number. Okay, next one. This is the question, and these are the choices. You need glasses, Bill.
Oh, I can see.
Okay. Somebody squints.
Oh, no, just trying to think.
No, not you. Yeah.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh, was it there? Oh.
that was pretty easy, so this is the last question. No, one more. Man, I don't know how you guys can do this with the mask on.
It's hard. We just have to get used to speaking loud, and we have to always asking the kids, can you repeat that? I can't hear you.
When I was at the 101st, I was with this training, of course, you had to wear a protective mask and chemical suits. Those things got, really hot, and you were training in the summer. You had to walk and carry our backpacks, rifles and stuff, and a protective mask. And you're not supposed to break the seal. And so we walked for, I guess, about 7 miles. And I could feel the sweat coming up to my lips because it gets caught in that. You can't break the seal like this. You have to keep it in there. Then they let us said all clear, took it off the face, and they said, oh, yes, yes, and then put it back on again. I got died, man. That's hard. All right, last question. I don't know if I put the answers. All right, let's go. Yeah. Oh, give your paper to somebody else. Switch up so they can go there.
Someone switch over to Zoom. Yeah, so there you go.
All right, number 1 will be. What was the question for number 1? Oh, you don't know.
Of the dates, right?
I have to go back. Number 2 is C. Number 3, C. Number 4, B. And number 5, A. Number 5 was China involved. They were, but not like they weren't like into a big involvement. They actually, if you ever saw a movie called Doolittle's War or The Raid or something like that, Taiwan, well, it was the Chinese people, but they provided air bases and stuff like that, emergency ones, and they were fighting against the Japanese. All right, anybody get 100? Okay. Those are pretty basic questions that you should know. Not vital that you know them, but when you start studying history, you always have to understand that things tend to happen over again, over and over again. All right, this is what happened after World War II. Germany was divided into East and West Germany, and the West Germans were allied with the Western powers, the United States and France and England. And they called themselves the Federal Republic of Germany. And then East Germany was dominated by the communist country. In this case, it was the USSR, Russia. And then they called themselves the DDR. That was the German Democratic Republic. It was kind of funny. The communists and other communist nations always refer to themselves as democratic, but in a sense they are, because
The Soviet Republic.
yeah, but it's not how it seems to be. The United States calls itself a democratic country, but they don't call themselves like the United States Democratic United or the Democratic United States of America. They don't do that. And after the war was over, that started the beginning of the Cold War in 1945. And they did that because the Western powers were concerned about the Soviet Union, and they couldn't agree on a lot of things. So they established what's called the NATO and the Warsaw Pact. NATO was the Western powers, Warsaw was led by the Soviet Republic and its satellite countries. And that existed for a long time. There is no Warsaw Pact now, but there is NATO still. And then Berlin was the capital of Germany, and that was divided into East and West Berlin. Once again, East Berlin was controlled by the Soviet Union, and the West Berlin was controlled or dominated by three other powers: the Americans, the French, and the United Kingdom or England. So Berlin was divided in half, and the Soviet Union took half, and then the other half was sectioned off into three sections. And then that's how that was organized. I served in West Berlin. Everybody should have got a chance to go to East Berlin because it was different. Have you ever seen The Wizard of Oz? Have you seen that? Okay, the beginning of the movie in The Wizard of Oz is in black and white until she goes in the house and crashes, and then she opens the door and then it's in color. Well, that's how East and West Berlin was. West Berlin was Oz, because it was colorful, had life and everything. East Berlin, once you stepped across the border or the checkpoint, it was like somebody threw a blanket over you. You really couldn't do anything. Everybody was watching you. There were cameras everywhere. Of course, we did the same thing. I saw those cameras. You could see everywhere in the West Berlin. They always made a joke that in the event of war, all the Soviets would have to do is just put a POW sign on the wall, because we were, I don't know how many miles into West or East Germany. So there was nothing that was going to happen. And if we had to fight, it was just a stalling tactic, I guess. We really want to. Okay, so that the formation of NATO is still intact. Korea was under Japanese rule. They were, I guess they were, Japan, the Empire of Japan had been in Korea, and they were just, I guess, fighting all the time. And they were, later it was occupied by the Soviet Union in the north and the United States in the south between these time periods, the 45 and 48. Then it was divided on the 38th parallel. That became the boundary of North and South Korea. And then Japanese, also the Japanese, I'll have to come to the next slide. But the Japanese occupied Vietnam during World War II, but they let the French remain there. And then that would in turn lead to the development of the Vietnam War. So what happened after World War II? There was quite a bit. It just wasn't the end of the war. Everything started collapsing, I guess, or just leading to one thing after another. Two more wars followed after that because of World War II. All right. Where's Korea? There's E or A, B, C, D, and E. Which one of those is Korea? It's on the, right on the table now. All right, where's Korea?
See?
Everybody write C?
Yes.
No, I don't believe it. Really? Okay. Yeah. This is Korea. Here's the 30th parallel where it's divided north and south. That, I don't know what that country is. That's Japan, that's Taiwan, and this is China.
E is part of Russia.
Yeah, I just don't know the name of it.
Oh, that's the province, yeah, I know the name of it.
Yeah, so, anyway, the answer was C. All right, so the Korean War. In 1910, Korea was annexed by Japan. What does annex mean in this case? You know?
Over.
Yeah. They've been fighting for a while. It's like what happened in Ukraine with Crimea. Soviet Union went up there and annexed Crimea from Ukraine. So now it belongs to Russia, which they said it always belonged to Russia. And kind of it did, but they annexed Korea or Crimea. So Japan annexed Korea in 1910, and after that, it was like an occupation, and they tried to destroy the culture of Korea. They did this by not allowing them to speak their language, to observe their customs. There was a lot of stuff they did, and they couldn't worship like they wanted to, and they even had to change their names to Japanese names. Where does that sound familiar? Yeah, United States, when the whites took over the lands from the Native Americans. Here, Utah was pretty bad. The kids were taken away from their families, which they did in Korea like this, made them change their clothing, and so this happened before, but it was pretty much what was going on years later. And did they succeed? No, because Korea went on offensive after this, and they finally succeeded in 1945. Japan said, okay, fine. So we're no longer under the Japanese influence. If you ever talk to Korea about it, it really upsets them a lot. They get really upset. If they say, oh yeah, you guys are like Japanese. So, this is when the Korean War began. And, read the documents about it. There was a U.S. force here, and I mean a U.S. force in Korea, but this is like right after the war, you know. We thought, hey, the war's over, everything's cool. But Korea got divided into North and South Korea after the war, because the Soviets had influence in the north, the U.S. had influence in the south, and so that's why they developed 30 parallel to keep them apart. But North Korea decided they wanted to occupy all of Korea, so they crossed over the line. That's when the war started. Actually, they don't really call it the Korean War because it was by President Harry S. Truman called a police action. They thought it would be like over a couple of months or something like that, but it didn't. So there was never a formally declared war, and the operation was conducted under the auspices of the United Nations. So they had NATO and the UN forces all got together, and they were fighting against the North Koreans. And the North Koreans had influence and equipment from the Soviet Union, and then also China came into the 1953, they reached an armistice, but South Korea didn't agree to that. And so technically they're still at war, and they still declare a war between North and South. But because of that parallel, the division, the E and Z, the military, so they try to keep them out, but North Korea always crosses over it sometimes, fire rockets and stuff like that. So right now they're trying to reach a peace treaty, but unless North Korea gives up their nuclear ambitions, it's not going to happen. That was good. You know what? I think I lost some information on the slide. Yeah, I left the slide out. That's okay. But then here on the Deep Tribe Reservation, there were several veterans that were, several tribal members that were veterans in the Korean War. One was killed in the Korean War. That actually was my uncle. He was with the 2nd Infantry Division. Their unit was just decimated. And I think it's because of the colonel that was in charge. And I was heard they were always contemplating some kind of action on him because of his negligence. But, you know, in the war, these happen. So it's not as organized as people might think. It's pretty chaotic. Yeah, there's only one Korean War veteran that I know is still alive, and that's my other uncle, who was over there too. I have 3 uncles in the war, and he's still alive, but he's getting old, so you know, it's not too much longer that he might not live that much longer. This is because of health issues too. He always said it was cold. That's the only thing he said he remembers about it. That he was always cold and he was always hungry because he didn't have rash or regular dining facilities and that kind of stuff. He was up there on the front lines, so he said he hated it. I can understand because Korea does get cold in the winter. It gets cold here. You can be wearing all kinds of clothing in Korea and you still be free. Do that for several years. But like I said, right now, there's just an armistice and nothing's been declared as a peace treaty or anything. So that may happen later. There's not really much we can tell you about Korea except for when it started and that kind of stuff. And even from Korea, like I said, after Korea, then Vietnam War happened. And that, you know, was due to after World War II. So everything intermingles. It's not an isolated incident where it'll stop. It just kind of spills over to the next era. And then, you know, now we're getting ready to leave Afghanistan. So who knows what's going to happen after that. But the United States can't be the police of the world. Although, you know, we do a lot, but it's nothing is ever enough during these times like that. Any questions about World War II? Yeah. It's kind of boring.
Have you heard any stories from, like from back, you know, any stories from any veterans of World War II, you know, just kind of back in the day when, any particular stories that you've heard or experiences that you've heard from veterans from World War II?
Because when I came here, there was only one World War II veteran alive, and he had a stroke, so he couldn't talk. But I think from what I researched about him, he arrived with his unit like about 2 days after D-Day. They went through where it was cleared for them to go through and up into the plants and stuff. There was another veteran named Nelson Tonivets, and he was, I can't remember which unit, he was with the 1st Infantry Division, and he received 2 Silver Star awards. Now, Silver Star is like the 3rd highest award you can receive in the military. First being Medal of Honor and the other Distinguished Service Cross. But he received 2 of those for actions that he took when he was with his unit. I have the citations, but I don't know if I remember right now. But he was pretty much took control by himself and suppressed the enemy, killed his son, and allowed his unit to continue their actions. So he was under constant heavy fire at that time. And then there was another guy named Aaron Daniels. He was in the Marine Corps. He was killed in the Battle of Tuara, against the Japanese. That was a huge operation. Thousands of Marines were killed in that battle. And his body has not been recovered. They had to bury him right there, so they didn't get sick and stuff like that. Somewhere along the line, these identification plates and stuff got misplaced by a well-intentioned chaplain. The chaplain went around and picked them all off the crosses, and then they nobody knew where it was. Well, they haven't been able to find it. They do find occasionally a fragment of a bone or something like that, but it's been years. Nelson was buried in he's buried in Belgium at the Veterans Memorial Cemetery. It's a really nice place. I've been up there. So he's buried there. Who else was there? There was another man. Keep myself, I don't remember the guy. I see why I support that. Remember who they are. But this other guy was captured towards the end of the war in the islands in the Philippines. Right up, it's a battle called the Battle of Carigo. He was captured with like thousands of other guys. He actually was imprisoned in a POW camp in Japan. If you got sent to Japan, unless you were like skilled in some kind of a job or something like that, you were able to stay alive. But if you were just like a regular nobody or something like that, you would probably die. A lot of them did. This guy, I remember when I leave, he died like about, I want to say like about three or 4 months before the war was over. He died of a sickness. They didn't give him any medicine or anything, so he passed away just before the war ended. And then another tribal member was killed in, I think it's called Argonne, France. He was killed in action there. Those are the four tribal veterans of World War II. Now there were a lot that served, but those are the four that perished. And then Memorial Day, if you get a chance, come on up to the monument, and then you'll see their names on that little monument up there with the soldiers. They call it the Soldier's Cross, with the rifle and the helmet on it. You can see who those guys. 4 World War II veterans, 1 Korean War veteran, and 2 Vietnam veterans. No, I did actually write a paper on the veterans on each time period, but I guess I haven't published it yet. I got to actually research it some more so I don't make a mistake on it. And then hopefully within a year or so, it'll be like a yearbook. And then I'll probably print those and then give those out to the families or the tribal members. But you have to be careful because the intentions may be good, or I want to write about a certain person, and that family member may get upset. Like, they don't even know about it. It's happened to me.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, I wrote an article about a Korean War veteran who passed away, and I put it on the internet. I put the tribe on the internet. And then a couple of days later, his son came after me. And just laid into me with all kinds of profanity. I don't know what he was upset about. And then he said some stuff to me. And then he left. And then I think about a week later, he came up to me and said, hey, I'm sorry. I don't know what got into my head. And what you wrote about my dad, that was good. So I'm a man, so I want to apologize to you. I'm like, okay, but man, I didn't know what was the matter with me. And then another guy, I published a picture of him. If you ever go into basic training or the military, you're going to get your hair shaved off. And then you're going to have a photo taken of you, keep holding an ink plate like this, and it looks like you're in jail. So I posted one photo of this guy, because he would never give me one, and I found it on the records. So I printed it with his name under it, and he was a Vietnam veteran. And then I don't know, a few days later, him and his wife came up there, started getting upset with me and yelling at me, asking me, who did this? And I said, I did. And it just kept going on and on again. I guess what had happened is he had went to eat lunch or breakfast with some family members. I guess they had the article there and they showed it to him. He didn't know it was there and showed it to him. And I guess they were making fun of him because he was like, he had been in jail holding that up there. So that made him upset. So he came after me. And I guess I must have listened to him just ranting and raving for like about 20 minutes. And then I just said, well, what do you want me to do? Take it off? He's like, yeah. I said, I can't. It's already published. And then he calmed down. Then he went out to the monument. He said that was the first time he'd seen it. It'd been there for like about 4 years when they came to see. They just never went over them. And anyway, the next issue of the bulletin came out, and there was a picture of him. But he was dressed in uniform with his hat on. And it was a good photo, and it was the same article, just a different photo. And he could have just given that to me when I asked him about it, but it took a little excitement, I guess, coming around. And I'm still researching photos too, so that's another thing. But it's important that you would know who your family relatives are if they serve in the military. So it's a good thing. I don't have anything else.
What about the Green Word, different experiences? I mean, you mentioned your uncle, you mentioned I was told all the time. Any other stories you can share from Korean veterans?
You know, my Uncle Fred, he was one of them. He was with 187th Regimental Combat Team, which was part of what's called the 11th Infantry Division. And he was over there. He made 2 combat jumps, parachute jumps. And so, I don't know if you know who General Westmoreland was, but he was the commander of forces in Vietnam. But my uncle said he jumped right after he did. But that was Lieutenant Westmoreland at the time. He was in front of me as they were getting ready to jump out of the plane. And he just said it was, he said the same thing as my uncle did, that it was just so cold. It was cold there, and they saw the Chinese, because he was in Manchuria when the Chinese came and counterattacked the forces. He said they just came wave after wave. Pretty sure he told me, he said like they didn't have any weapons. They would just hear the bugle sound and early in the morning. And then when he said they'd see him coming, had the machine gun going, that was it. They'd die, and another wave would come. And then after, I don't know, just masses were killed, and the regular troops would come. Those were the ones that had weapons and stuff. And what they did was exhaust the ammunition of the friendly forces, so they couldn't really counterattack them back or anything. He said that was probably like one of the most frightening things he's been through. Then he described how they were in caves and they couldn't get them to come out. The North Koreans wouldn't come out, so they would flank forward into the cave to get them, kill them. Chinese, he said, gave up. They surrendered. They didn't have any clothes. And no winter clothes or shoes or anything, so it was better for them to surrender. And most of them didn't want to fight anyway, but they had to. And he said it was the same thing. There was hardly any food. The winter clothing was non-existent. He liked airplanes because he was always driving them. And he didn't talk much about it. He would just say that it wasn't something that he would like to do, that he would have to do with it. That was it. But he stayed in after he got out. And Uncle Bernard, like I said, he was on a half track and, you know, he just said that everywhere they went, it was like muddy, cold, no food. He said he walked down the mountain to see another camp, see if they had any food, and they were asking him the same thing. Hey, you got any food? Any rations? That kind of stuff. So that part wasn't very well done. He was over there in the latter part. Oh man, you know, I don't know any other Korean War veterans, except one guy up in North Ogden, and he was a Marine. No, I'm sorry, he was in Vietnam. Yeah.
Well, what about, since we've got about 4 minutes left, what about your service while you're here? Even though it wasn't, you know, World War II or Korean War, if you could tell them about your service and what you experienced.
I went in 1980, in April of 1980. I graduated in 1973 from Union High School. And then after I graduated, pretty much left the country right after that for a couple of years. And then I came back and I went to school at Brigham Young University. And then I was there for a while. I ended up going to Chicago with the help of a friend drive up there. And then I stayed there, worked in the hospital for a while as an assistant pathologist. And I woke up one morning and thought, you know, I should do my duty to my country, because I was a big JFK fan, and John F. Kennedy. And, so I sent in some little pamphlets about the Army and the Air Force and the Marine Corps. The Marines called me like a week later at 6 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday. Wanting you to come in. Oh man, Saturday. So I went in to go talk with them, but they didn't have anything I was interested in. And then I wanted to join the Army to do a helicopter door gunner called a crew chief, but they told me they didn't have it. And then I was learning Russian at the hospital from some people that were from Russia. And when the recruiter say that, they took me in to do a test. It's called the DLAT test. And they scored high enough that they said we could send you to Presidio, Monterey, California to learn Russian. Because at that time, that was the Cold War was going on. So they were always looking for people that spoke the Russian language. So I went to the school. It was boring. It was. All you did was learn Russian, and my military occupational specialty was voice interceptor. All I did was listen to conversations and listen to numbers, and then you have to decipher the numbers and stuff. But that's what it was. I hated it. So I got out, transferred, and went into the infantry, and then got in the infantry, went over to Germany. And then I was told by my commander there not to speak Russian, because if they found out and they'd take you out and put you in another section, and he didn't have a lot of people in his command. He actually told me, like, speak very little of it. So I did that for a couple of years, came back, went to 101st, got sent over to Egypt, to Sinai for a peacekeeping tour. That was like, we were like the second generation to go over there. And came back, I think I went to Berlin. Spent about 3 or 4 years there. Came back to the States for about a year, then got sent back to Germany. And then I came back and got sent over to South Korea for 7 years. About that time, that's when the war started in Iraq. So I went to Iraq several times. Once I went with the brigade first time, and the next few times I went over with a team of soldiers, with 11 of, there were 11 of us, and we embedded with the Iraqis. And, that was some good duty. Almost actually I did, got blown up quite a few times. And it was good. I'm not saying it was good to go to war, but it was good that I was with I call my friends, to good duty station, or it was a good time for me at that time. Got out, was gonna get sent to Afghanistan, but I think I was like 54 at that time. And I just couldn't, my back wouldn't take it anymore. You wear like over 60 pounds of equipment, and plus you're carrying ammunition and everything else. So I thought that was it. I gotta get out. So I did. Lived in China for a while, and then I came back here, and that's it. And I've been here. So the military's a good place. I'm actually using the GI Bill, getting a bachelor's degree in digital photography. It's pretty cool. So I should graduate next year, summer. You're invited. Arizona State University. I'll be up there, learn all that stuff.
Get excited.
I should actually graduate with summa cum laude or something like that. Trying to go for the highest one, but
Right.
I screwed up in the beginning, so I keep working at it, and I only have a couple of semesters left. So, yeah, keep it up. Pay attention, don't fall asleep, and you'll be good to go.
You guys have any questions for him?
Join the military, but join as an officer. So you get a lot more benefits and the pay is better. Yeah, then you get an education first, but then they own you. That's it. Yeah, they'll own you after that for several years. So, hey, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Another slide. I don't know if
Thank you.
Hey, thank you.
Oh, thanks.
Okay, well, okay, go ahead, start for a few minutes, there, guys. Go ahead and grab your stuff and go on to the next class.